followed by the Chargers, the Steelers. No Chiefs in the playoff picture just yet, but we'll keep our eye on them. They're going against the Broncos, who are the current 2 seed. Then on the right, the NFC. No surprise, the Philadelphia Eagles have gotten it together. They stand atop those standings. You got the Seahawks in the mix, too. Really, the NFC West is cooking right now. We're going to talk about that later in the show. But let's get into some postseason conversations. And for more on the postseason, we bring in our NFL writer, John Breach. Breach is going to kind of break down the playoff picture for us into tiers. And Breach, we're starting with teams that are a lock for postseason play. So these are ones that our Sportsline model basically gives a 90% chance or better to make the postseason. Which teams are you liking in that bracket, Breach?
That's right. And Sportsline isn't saying they're a lock. I'm saying they're a lock because these teams are not going to collapse down the stretch. Let's start in the AFC. The teams that have a 90% chance or better of getting in. The New England Patriots. They haven't been to the playoffs since 2021. It's like Tom Brady days back there with Drake May. So they look like a lock right now. The Indianapolis Colts coming on strong. And then also the Denver Broncos. And those 3 teams have one big thing in common, Haley. They are all 8-2. And so when you have that record 10 weeks through the season, they could essentially collapse down the stretch and probably still make the playoffs. You're looking at these 3 teams. If they go 3-4 over their final 7 games, they still get to 11-6. That's getting you in the playoffs. So these 3 teams feel very, very comfortable right now. In the NFC, there are 4 teams that have chances above 90%. We're looking at them right now. That is the Seahawks, the Los Angeles Rams, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You mentioned the NFC West. It really feels like the Seahawks and Rams are kind of running away with that division. The 49ers are kind of beat up. It would be a shocker if either of those 2 teams was left out. The NFC East, outside of Philadelphia, is a total disaster. I think Philadelphia could sleepwalk through the rest of the season and still win that division title. And then obviously the NFC South, the Buccaneers, because they are in a division that is not so great, that is why Tampa Bay is so high on the list. So there you go. Half the playoff spots already taken. It right there, 7-14.
That means everyone else is kind of clawing and scratching and chasing after all these teams. I mentioned it. No Chiefs in the AFC picture just yet, but they've got a big test against the Broncos this weekend. Let's talk about some playoff new bloods here, Breach. These are teams that are like not normally our cast of characters when we think about postseason football, but could make some news down the stretch. So what teams are you looking at here?
Well, one of the stats that always blows my mind with the NFL is that in every season since 1990, there have been 4 new playoff teams. And every year I think there's no way that's going to continue this year. At some point it's going to end. There's not going to be 4 new playoff teams. But guess what? We're perfectly on track to have 4 new playoff teams that did not make the playoffs last year. We mentioned the Patriots and the Colts. Neither of them were in the postseason last year. We know that. The Patriots haven't been there since Mac Jones a few years ago. It's also been a few years for the Indianapolis Colts. Then you also have a couple other teams that could end up in the playoffs that were not in there last year. And with that, we're talking about the Bears and 49ers kind of duking it out at the bottom of the NFC for possibly a 6th or 7th seed. I think the 49ers probably have a little bit of an easier path there. And then we also have the Seahawks. They've been so good this season. It's easy to forget they did not make the playoffs. They went 10-7, just missed out on winning the NFC West, but they didn't even get the wild card with those 10 wins. And so they left out last year. So when Seattle gets in, they're one of the locks again. That means they will be back in the postseason for the first time in several years. So there you go. We've got the Colts, the Patriots, the Seahawks, and then probably the Bears or 49ers. I like San Francisco a little bit more, and so does Sportsline, giving them a 70% chance to get in.
How fun have the Bears been this year? My goodness, all of those games coming down to the wire in the fourth quarter. I would like to see them in the postseason just for what they've done through the first half of the season. Maybe not so much for this next tier, though, John. We're talking teams hanging on by a thread, which basically means there's a chance, but you got to have a lot working in your favor. The Bengals and the Finns in this conversation.
Yeah, these are the 2 teams that need to fire up the Lloyd Christmas meme. So you're telling me there's a chance. Well, I know the Dolphins are 3-7. I know the Bengals are 3-6. But the reason these teams are still hanging on by a thread, let's look at Miami's schedule right here. Sure, they're 3-7. They're headed to Spain this week. They're about to face the Washington Commanders, a very winnable game. The 2 games after that, the New Orleans Saints, the New York Jets. If you win all three of those, I think the Miami Dolphins will be favored in all three games. Now you're 6-7 heading into Week 15, and you are right back in the playoff race heading into a Monday night game with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I think the Dolphins have to feel good about where they are right now, considering their circumstances. And Mike McDaniel certainly feels good about things because he's out there doing victory laps in his car around bars in Fort Lauderdale where Bills fans hang out. And then let's look at the Bengals. Sure, they're 3-6 and their defense can't stop anyone. But the one thing to keep in mind with Cincinnati is if they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday, they're only going to be one game out of first place. And let's not forget, Joe Burrow just returned to practice on Monday. He is targeting that Thanksgiving game in Week 15 against the or Week 13 against the Baltimore Ravens. So if you're Cincinnati and you beat the Steelers, you're one game out, you have Burrow coming back for Thanksgiving, now you feel like suddenly maybe you can steal this division. So I think the Bengals and Dolphins, just keep those hopes alive there, Bengals and Dolphins fans.
How about Mike McDaniel rolling past the competition at the elbow room, watch hanging out the window? He knew what he was doing there. Baller move on his part there. Let's talk about a division breach that it feels like no one wants to win in. We know the AFC North is always a gauntlet. This year, no different. It just seems like the race is going to come down to the final wire here. You got the Ravens getting healthy. You got the Steelers looking a little shaky, like you just talked about, and the Bengals, too. So how do you see this race playing out? Who wins it?
Yeah, I'm not going to rule out any of these teams. I realize we're looking here at the odds, and the Ravens are a huge odds-on favorite right now. The Bengals interesting at plus 1,100, but the one thing with the Ravens, remember, they already have 5 losses, so they are 4-5. And another thing to keep in mind is that over the past 5 years, the best division record the Ravens have ever had is 4-2. So they have lost at least 2 division games in every season over the past 5 years. Well, if they lose 2 division games this year, that gets them up to 7 losses. And now all of a sudden, you don't feel like the favorite to win the division. They still have to play the Steelers twice. They still have to play the Bengals twice. And I'm not just going to hand them those 2 games to Cincinnati, because if you're Baltimore, you're either going to be facing Joe Flacco, who is going to be out in an all-time revenge game, or you're going to be facing Joe Burrow, who has diced up that secondary multiple times. And then with those Steelers games, Mike Tomlin has a very good track record against the Ravens. So I don't know if the Ravens are just going to sweep those. And if they don't, they still have the Packers and Patriots on the schedule. So I don't think Baltimore should be as heavy as a favorite as they are. I do think they probably win the division, but I think the Steelers and Bengals are absolutely still alive. And whoever wins that Bengals-Steelers game on Sunday, I think, is going to have the inside track to
Steelers Nation, gather around, because what we are witnessing right now is the perfect example of why leadership matters in the NFL and why Mike Tomlin continues to prove to this league year after year that Pittsburgh is built on accountability, standards, and the courage to make tough decisions even when the outside world questions everything. Today we're diving deep into the release of safety Juan Thornhill, a move that raised eyebrows across the league for about 5 seconds until Mike Tomlin stepped forward, looked straight into the cameras, and delivered the most brutally honest explanation that only he can deliver. An explanation that makes sense, that reflects the realities of this roster, and, most importantly, reinforces why this organization remains one of the most stable in the NFL, even when the fan base is restless. The Steelers cut ties with Thornhill after 9 games, and if you were shocked, you weren't paying attention. Because while the injuries in the secondary might have suggested Pittsburgh would cling to any available body, Tomlin once again reminded everyone that this team doesn't cling to bodies, it clings to performance. Thornhill hadn't played a single snap in the last 2 contests, not on defense, not on special teams. And when that happens, when a veteran completely disappears from the rotation, you know something deeper is going on. Tomlin confirmed exactly that. The play wasn't up to snuff. He didn't sugarcoat it, he didn't dance around it, he didn't protect feelings, he simply said the truth. The performance didn't meet the standard. That right there is the core of Steelers football. It doesn't matter how big your contract once was, it doesn't matter what your name is, and it certainly doesn't matter what you did in another city. If you put on the black and gold, you meet the standard or you don't play. Period. But the release of Thornhill wasn't just about underperformance. Mike Tomlin made something very clear. This was about Sebastian Castro. This was about opportunity. This was about development. This was about reclaiming a player Pittsburgh believed in from the very beginning. Tomlin explained that when Castro became available, the decision became simple. This is someone who had a strong camp, someone who had a strong preseason, someone who earned respect from the staff during joint practices with Tampa Bay, someone who played hungry, explosive, relentless football. And sometimes in this league, you have to make choices based on future value, not past reputation. Castro was someone the Buccaneers literally stole from Pittsburgh because they saw exactly what Tomlin saw. Now the Steelers have him back. And with the attrition the secondary has suffered over the past several weeks, this timing couldn't be better. Because while Thornhill's ceiling had already been reached and evaluated, Castro's ceiling is rising. And if there's one thing Tomlin has always excelled at, it's spotting grinders, workers, fighters, and developing them into starters, contributors, and difference makers. Let's not pretend Thornhill didn't bring hype when he arrived. He was signed in March after Cleveland gave up on him. A reminder that they had paid him a hefty 3-year, $21 million deal only to walk away after 2 indifferent seasons. Pittsburgh didn't invest big money, but they invested opportunity. And early on, Thornhill had a legitimate role. He had snaps, he had chances. But the moment Pittsburgh traded for Kyle Duggar, and the moment they made the decision to move Jalen Ramsey to safety full-time, Thornhill's window closed fast. And it closed for the simplest reason in the world. He didn't earn his place in the pecking order. Even his special teams role vanished in the last 4 games. When a player loses defensive reps and special teams reps, in Pittsburgh, that's the beginning of the end. That's a message you can't ignore. Thornhill's film showed inconsistency, missed angles, late reactions. You cannot survive in this system if you're late. In Pittsburgh's defense, the safety room cannot think. It must anticipate. It must attack. Thornhill wasn't doing that. Meanwhile, Castro is a player who wants every snap. He's raw, he's younger, but he's hungrier. And sometimes hunger beats resume. That's what Tomlin believes in. That's what this franchise is built on. Thornhill, for all his veteran experience, simply couldn't keep up with the expectations here. And you know what? That honesty is refreshing. It also sends a clear message to the locker room. If you want a seat at the table, you fight for it every week. While critics outside are calling the Steelers a messy team, a stale team, a team that hasn't won a playoff game in too long, this move proves otherwise. This is accountability. This is roster management with purpose. This is a coach refusing to cling to safe names or comfortable veterans. This is Tomlin protecting the future, protecting the standard, and protecting the foundation that this team will lean on as the playoff push intensifies. And let's be clear, the Steelers are still very much alive. They're still fighting for the AFC North crown. They're still positioned to control their destiny. They're still fielding one of the most aggressive, opportunistic defenses in the league, especially after the resurgence against Indianapolis, where they forced turnover after turnover and reminded everyone that Pittsburgh's DNA is still built on chaos, pressure, and opportunistic football. Kyle Duggar is playing with fire. Jalen Ramsey's move to safety has restored structure to the back end. The edge rushers are still wreaking havoc, and now with Castro returning, the Steelers have a chance to inject youthful energy and versatility back into a position group that desperately needs it. If Castro lives up to what he showed in the summer, this could become one of those sneaky midseason moves that quietly upgrades the roster without costing a single draft pick. That's how you win in November. That's how you survive December. That's how you enter January with belief. So if you're a Steelers fan and you're confused about the Thornhill move, don't be. Tomlin just did what great organizations do. He cut a player who wasn't earning his place and replaced him with a player who might help you win games in the second half of the season. That's not controversial. That's smart football. That's Steelers football. And as always, Steelers Nation, I want your voice in this. Do you agree with Tomlin's decision? Do you think Castro will be a meaningful upgrade? Are you relieved Thornhill is gone? Or do you think he deserved more time? Let me know what you think in the comments. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the breakdown, and don't forget to subscribe to Steelers Nation Wire for more reactions, analysis, and breaking news throughout this wild season.